step. Okay. 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 Shalom Aleichem, everybody. I hope you had a great week and a good Shabbos. This week I just wanted to cover the rest of chapter 3 in the book and talk some more, and also the chapter that deals with the 10 questions about kosher, which is actually skipping a little bit, which is chapter 6. We covered a lot of this last week, and that's fine, but I wanted to sort of go back over some things and discuss some other stuff. So it'll be a little review and a lot of new stuff. Okay. So in chapter 3, he basically divides it into 2 parts. The first part is he breaks down the he calls it the one step at a time approach to keeping kosher. Yitzchak, can you please get me the Jewish calendar? And the second part is really the psychological and sociological part of deciding to keep kosher. Can you just get me the one off the... So we spoke a little bit about that last week. What do you do if you're in a situation where you have a business meeting, you can't get out of it, yada yada. What are you going to do? Oh, thank you, Stephen, for letting me know that the mic works great. We had a mic issue. My daughter decided to pull this other one apart and take all the wires out. So this is what's left of it, which is very sad. So I feel a little bit like fast food operator here, and I should ask you if you want fries with that. But why don't you just get me the one from that was already open? Okay. Now that I have all my equipment ready, so he is talking in chapter 3 about the steps to taking kosher. And on page 59, he has the one step at a time approach, and he really, really breaks it down into like teeny tiny steps. For example, step number 1 is the decision. You have decided that I'm going to experiment with keeping kosher, or I am eventually going to commit to keeping kosher. So that's awesome and everything. But I want to get even... when I kept kosher, I didn't have this. When I started keep kosher, I didn't have this book. And I did have the advice of a really great rabbi, and that was very helpful to me. So what you can do is, I'll tell you my steps. Well, actually, first I'll just cover his steps, and then I'll tell you what I did with my steps sort of along the way. And then we can talk about the cashering the kitchen part, which is the next bit I want to get to. So the second step is getting your big toe wet. He says, and it's very baby steps here, begin by eliminating one non-kosher food item from your diet, starting to look for hechshers on food items, and when you're ready, eliminate another non-kosher food item from your diet. So that could mean cheeseburgers, it could mean shellfish, it could mean any number of things, but he's only requesting in step 2 that you eventually eliminate 2 non-kosher food products from your diet, which is, wow, it's that's not that much to ask, especially for those of you that are accepting upon yourselves the yoke of Judaism, or those of you who are coming into observance. It's a huge commitment. It's one that changes your life, and to eliminate 2 non-kosher food items from your diet in the second step is not asking that much. So this is really, really baby steps. He's breaking it down, and it's probably not that hard to follow. Probably most of you have already eliminated 1 or 2 non-kosher items from your diet. So mazel tov, we're already at step 3. He calls this step waiting in. It says, familiarize yourself with the kosher butcher in your city and the kosher section at your local grocery. This could also mean ordering, figuring out where you need to order from online, and or going to your grocery store and asking them to special order things for you. This does happen. I actually live in a community where, Baruch Hashem, we have most things kosher, but certain things we don't, and I do need to order them. We have no kosher restaurants here, so it's, if I want something fancy, I have to go elsewhere or order it. And that's totally fine. And that's, it's become a part of my life. If you're lucky enough to live in a place where you have a lot of kosher stuff around, good on ya. Good for you. Okay. His second step of part 3 is eliminate non-kosher meat from your diet. And he recommends breaking this down to 2 steps. First at home, and then later when you're ready away from home. Eliminate non-kosher seafood from your diet and try various pastries at your local kosher bakery. Well, twist my arm, that'd be so hard. I hope that if you have a local kosher bakery, you've already made a foray in there and you are beginning to patronize their services, because usually they have really great stuff and I highly recommend it. Okay. So, stage 4, he calls letting go, and it says stop eating meat and dairy at the same meal. Begin waiting an hour or 2 after eating meat until eating dairy, and begin buying 5 or 6 types of products with the kosher symbol. For example, only purchasing tuna, pasta, coffee, ice cream, and olives with a hechsher. Pretty easy again. Step 5, swim like a fish. Begin purchasing only kosher food for your home. Eliminate all but your one favorite non-kosher restaurant, and seriously consider cashering your kitchen. And the last step he calls the summit, ready to cash your home. He recommends reading chapter 5, which is about cashering home, which we're actually skipping for right now, and for reasons I'll explain later. And discuss your decision with a rabbi or friend who keeps kosher and go for it. So hopefully you're already under the supervision of a rabbi or someone that can help you sort of go through these stages. So he really broke it down, baby steps, and then I feel like towards the end, step 4 and step 5, it was like all of a sudden now you're, full-time kosher. Which is totally fine. If these steps work for you and you're already sort of following his guide, please continue. It's great. He's really laid it out well, and I really think he did a great job with it. I'll tell you what I did, and what worked best for me was to get your Jewish calendar, and I have one right here. Thank you to Chabad Lubavitch of Montana, my good friend Chaim Brook, for providing this for me. So you're going to look at your calendar, and what I did was I made goals around certain holidays. So one of the big holidays that's coming up is Purim, and Purim is coming up actually not that far away. Purim is the 20th of March this year. So you could conceivably set a goal for yourself to have something ready in that short amount of time. But even more importantly, Passover is coming up. Passover starts the evening of the 18th of April. And this is important for reasons I'll discuss again in a few minutes. But my first step in keeping kosher was to grab my calendar and set up a goal for keeping stage 1. Now, stage 1 was, and now these are, basically what I did is I said, I'm not going back. Once I get into this stage, that's the point of no return. So the first stage for me was, I still ate out at non-kosher restaurants. I still, basically lived my whole life normally, except I did not mix meat and milk ever. Oh, I wasn't Jewish yet. You should all know this. Like, I wasn't a Jew, and I was working my way towards conversion. So you should know that I wasn't a Jew, and so it really wasn't incumbent upon me yet to keep kosher to the fullest. So I had time sort of to play with. But this is how I did it. I went to non-kosher restaurants still, but I would not mix meat or milk. So, like, I went to McDonald's and I would get, a hamburger, but not a cheeseburger. Or I would get a fillet of fish or something, or chicken nuggets or something like that. But no cheese, no dairy mixing meat and dairy. I could eat dairy immediately afterwards. I wasn't waiting yet, but I would not mix them in the same meal. I would also not eat pork or non-kosher fish out. Actually, even in my home, I wasn't doing this, so I just stopped doing that altogether. I was like, this is it, I'm not going to do it, but I would still eat it like Wendy's and so on and so forth. So that was my first stage, and I did that for a while. And I set a goal for myself, I think, of Rosh Hashanah. But when Rosh Hashanah rolled around and I wasn't ready to move on to the second stage, then I bumped it further and I said, okay, by Sukkot. And I think by Sukkot I was really ready, but you have the ability, especially if you're in the situation where you're learning to become Jewish and you have that luxury of time, you can wait. You can give yourself more time. So if you're not ready by Rosh Hashanah, you're not ready by Sukkot, you might be ready by Hanukkah, and that's fine. You can give yourself more time if you feel like you're not ready. But once you feel you're ready, that's it. You cannot go back on the stages. That was sort of my rule I set up for myself. The second stage was that I was still separating meat and milk, but I would wait 6 hours after eating meat before eating any dairy products. I would only eat foods in my house that had a hechsher, but I still had my non-kosher dishes and everything. And what was the other thing I did? So I began to start, I was like, that's it. Only foods with hechshers in my house. And I'm still eating out, but I'm going to wait 6 hours between meat and milk. And I didn't stay in this stage for very long, because once I was already in that family, that world, it wasn't so hard. So I just noticed that Laser Wolf said it must be a nightmare trying to keep kosher while living with a family who doesn't. So I'll tell you that when I started my journey of keeping kosher and becoming Jewish, I lived with non-Jewish people, and we shared a kitchen, and you can do it. Basically, you got to get a lot of plastic paper and plastic goods, and you have to mark everything, label it, and be very, very scrupulous about the labeling. So I would tell my roommates, like, this peanut butter is my kosher peanut butter, and I would write kosher on the top. So only take from it with a plastic, fork or knife, whatever. Um, and don't mix between two different places. Um, so and they were, I got very lucky. They were super cool about it. And I'm just saying, it can be done. It's very difficult, but with a little communication and a little bit of open-mindedness, everybody can benefit from the situation. Rabbi Apisdorf, covers this in chapter 3. Let me find the page for you. He goes over it really well. Like on page 79, he says when children keep kosher and parents don't. It's a little bit different, if you're dealing with a roommate situation or living with friends, but that's also covered in his little exposition on the sociology of keeping kosher. So don't feel like it's impossible. It may be hell, but it's not the end of the world. You can do it. You just have to be very open-minded, and the other people have to be, and you have to have a lot of communication too. Okay. The third stage was when I went sort of in all the way, and I stopped eating out at non-kosher restaurants. I only had kosher dishes. Again, I was sharing a house with people, so I mostly had paper and plastic. I had a kosher microwave, and that was it. And I was still waiting the 6 hours between meat and milk and so on and so forth. Um, there was a time where I lived in a very religious neighborhood, which was crazy and a total blessing, when I decided to convert. That's actually not why I decided to convert. I didn't even know it was a religious Jewish neighborhood until later. Um, I didn't even notice, really. But I got blessed because I had a great kosher supermarket. I had a great kosher butcher. I had all of kosher food right around the corner from my house. And I wasn't that far from New York City, so I had variety if I needed it. So it wasn't terrible. It was totally doable. It was, keeping kosher was very hard for me as a foodie. Towards the end of stage 3, when I was getting closer to my conversion, I started to keep really high levels of kosher. And again, I lived in a religious neighborhood, so it was really easy. I began to keep chol visrael, which we spoke about in, I think, the second or third kosher class. Um, Milk that's only been observed by a Jew. And I began to try to keep pas Yisrael, which is eating baked goods that have been baked by a Jew. And again, I had a kosher bakery there. I had all sorts of, you know, products at my disposal. Um, but it was funny because after I converted, I suddenly had this gigantic Yetzer Hara that I didn't know what to do with. And the Yetzer Hara is the impulse, I guess loosely translated be the evil impulse or the impulse to do something um, that is against the Torah, and it's particularly so if you're trying to do something holy. It's very, very strong if you're trying to do something holy. So I had a very big Yetzer Hara for non-kosher food right after my conversion, which seemed crazy to me because I was a Jew. So what did I need with that? But it was really, really tough for me. And with the help of a really great rabbi, I made my way through and sort of took a step back and said, okay, I don't need to keep Chol Yisrael right now, and I don't need to keep Has Yisrael right now. So um, again, I would just tell you guys, please, 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 get in touch with a rabbi, have the rabbi help you out, and listen to what they have to say. Don't be afraid to tell them like, I want to go eat at Taco Bell. It's calling my name. And that's exactly what I told my rabbi, and he was super understanding and super cool. So, don't be afraid to do that. Okay, so those are the stages that I took. That's the steps that I took. It may not be perfect for you. Again, you can, tailor make it to your own world and sort of what you're going through at any certain time. Now, I want to talk to you about Pesach. Pesach is coming up the 18th of April. Everybody has to kasher their kitchen for Pesach anyway. Whether you've been keeping kosher for years and years and years and years, or you've been keeping kosher for a month. Everybody kashers their kitchen for Pesach. So one of the things that I recommend for people who are starting to keep kosher is that they probably want to try to kasher their kitchen for Pesach. Keep kosher for Passover, Pesach is Passover. Keep kosher for Pesach. And then when you're done with Pesach, your kitchen's already kashered. You can use those utensils you use for Pesach, and then next year you buy new utensils and pots for Passover. Um, that's a really easy way to sort of get into the kitchen aspect and kashering your kitchen and the full on, eating at home jobby. So for those of you who are wondering, again, it's coming up the evening of the 18th of April. So that's a goal that you could have, and it would make it very easy. Also, in Passover, things are a lot more restricted. You're not allowed to eat grain or grain products. Ashkenazi Jews, if you are studying with someone who's from an Ashkenazi tradition or your family's Ashkenazi, we don't eat rice and we don't eat beans. Sephardim do. So if you're Sephardi or you're studying with someone who's Sephardi, you can eat those. We call them kitnias. But again, you want to talk to your local rabbi about what your custom is and what you should be doing. So it's a lot more restrictive than regular kosher. So when you get done with that 1 week of Passover, it's like, wow, I can pretty much eat anything. You feel like, keeping kosher, regular kosher for all year round doesn't seem that hard. And plus, your kitchen will already be kashered, and you can just move forward, um, as you know, as you want. So, having said that, I am going to skip ahead. I'm going to skip the chapter on kashering your kitchen because I would like to do that closer to Passover. In case any of you want to take advantage of that opportunity that you can cash your kitchen for Passover and just sort of, keep it kosher like that. And I'm going to skip ahead to the 10 questions people ask about kosher. This is chapter 6, and it starts on page 169. And I am going to skip a few of these questions you can, read for yourself. But he has some really great insights into some of these questions and answers, actually, even. Okay. It says, question 4 is, can pork chops ever be kosher? And he says, a pig is a pig, but for those kosher consumers who can't sleep at night because they wonder what pork chops taste like, it's called tofu. You can find tofu turkey, or neighborhood natural grocery store before Thanksgiving, and actually now all year round, and tofu hot dogs to barbecue, and ice cream, and, parve ice cream for dessert, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to cover what he says in the insight section because I think it's really amazing. Oh, Laser Wolf is asking about the book. It's called Kosher for the Clueless but Curious. And it's by Shimon Apisdorf. Okay. That's for you, Laser Wolf. I hope that helps. Okay. So in the insight, he says the Talmud itself addresses the same issue of divine compensation for the fact that Jews will never ever be able to taste a succulent piece of ham. It says in Chulin 109b, for all foods forbidden by the Torah, there is a permissible food with the same taste. I was in Brooklyn at a restaurant called Bertolini's. It's a dairy restaurant, and the special of the day was sea bass. They had prepared the sea bass in a way that, I'm not kidding you, it tasted exactly like trafe fish. Like, it tasted like crab legs, honestly. It had that same texture, and it was very buttery, and it totally fulfilled my craving for crab legs. I was like, yeah, this is it. So you can prepare foods in a way, that might satisfy your craving for that. Another example just actually happened today, that I love the breakfast sandwiches from McDonald's called McGriddles. It's basically a blueberry muffin with a little hint of maple syrup flavor, sausage, egg, and cheese, okay? And it's amazing. My husband today made a similar sandwich with whole grain bread. He put a little maple syrup on the inside of the bread. He put cheese and egg, and it was delicious, and it totally fulfilled that, like, craving, that sort of fantasy I had for the McGriddle. So it's totally possible for you to have, something that tastes similar to what you are craving. Okay, moving on. It says that everything, at one time or another, almost every person asks the question, what's it all about? At issue is what life is all about. The Jewish understanding is that life is about achieving the pleasures of living. When you think about the array of physical pleasures available to us, you could possibly conclude that God went a little overboard. After all, the world has over 250 flowering plants, each with its own unique shape, coloring, and scent. And he gives a little blurb here from Rabbi Victor Miller's Rejoice, O Youth, which is an amazing book if you've never read it. It's incredible. It covers halacha, but it also covers hashkafa, or Jewish philosophy, and the background behind the halachas, or the Jewish laws. Okay. This is the blurb he quotes. The blue of the sky, the green of the trees, the beautiful hues of the various flowers, the glory of the sunrise and sunset are but part of the happiness bestowed on man. The pleasure of smell is a remarkable happiness, the savor of foods, of baking, of spices. The pleasures of sound are also noteworthy, and man has found happiness in music from the most ancient times. Perhaps many of these pleasures are not intended for man's happiness, but merely to induce him to do what is necessary for his existence. For this the Creator could have forced man to eat by the mere desire to relieve the pain of hunger. The pleasure of eating and procreating is a gift from the Creator, and the purpose is to bestow kindness on man. So you see that the kosher laws are not just, Hashem made hunger and he made the desire to procreate. Those are like animal instincts, but he made it so that they're both pleasurable things. Food tastes good. It fills us up. It has great texture. Certain things have different tastes, and he made it so it's like a little gift. It's a little present from Hashem that these things are so pleasurable, as well as being good for us and necessary to our survival. Okay, so Laser Wolf has a question, which is a really good question, and it will kind of segue into my next bit. But before I answer his question, I wanted to recommend to all of you to watch, maybe on YouTube. I think on YouTube they have it. Victor Miller. He does a little blurb on apples and how an apple is like a love letter from Hashem. It has a beautiful color, a great texture, a great scent, and it's very nutritious for us. So I highly recommend that you look at that, and I'll type it into the chat box so that you can see that. Okay. So, Laser Wolf asks, why does any Jew want to know what treif tastes like? Wouldn't it be kind of sinful for a Jew to imitate eating treif? Very good question, Laser Wolf. And there is a concept in Judaism called maras ayin, which basically means we don't want to give anybody the illusion that we're doing something wrong, even though we're doing something totally right. Rabbi Apisdorf actually covers this. Let's see. And 170, page 178. Is it okay to eat kosher food in non-kosher home or restaurant? And he gives an answer, and he says two issues come into play: the technical part and the perception part. So the thing that we're dealing with here with maras ayin is the question of perception. Says the question of perception has nothing to do with whether or not the food is actually kosher, but rather with the concern that the projection of a false or confusing impression may inadvertently lead someone else to eat non-kosher food. For example, I love to go to McDonald's at Walmart and get a soda when I'm shopping, okay? The soda at McDonald's is totally kosher. It's in a kosher cup. It never touches meat, anything. But if I go in there with my tichel and my long skirt and my high neck shirts, it may be that someone might see that, a Jew who's either not religious or someone who's not Jewish and, is curious about Judaism or what have you, and think, oh, that religious Jew is going into McDonald's, so it must be okay for me to go in there and eat a Big Mac. And you would be shocked at the number of stories people have told me of seeing someone who looks religious, who has a kippah on, who is wearing a tichel, or, is dressed very tzniustig, going into an unkosher restaurant for totally kosher purposes, for a business, to go there. Maybe they're a salt supplier and they're going to ask the people how many boxes of salt do they need, or so on and so forth. But it led them to believe that it might be okay if they would just go there and eat. Like, maybe if this person knows something that I don't. So that's called maras ayin, and it's a very, very, you have to be very, very careful about it. So I guess, Laser Wolf, you're asking, would it be kind of sinful for a Jew to imitate eating treif? In the sense that of maras ayin, you don't want someone to think that you're eating something treif, because then it might lead them to think, oh, that religious person's doing it, so it must be okay to eat it. If you're eating, you can totally have bacon bits, okay? They make artificial bacon bits. Bacos are totally kosher. Also, the generic browns often of the Bacos are kosher. Now, the real bacon bits, of course, are not kosher, but the artificial ones are kosher, and they add a nice flavor to a lot of things. And we really enjoy them at our house, but we always make sure to set the package out so that people can see that we're using a product that has a hechsher on it. We don't want anyone to have the illusion that we're eating something that wouldn't be 110% kosher. A lot of the products that I spoke about last week, like yes, sweetheart. Okay, just a minute. The smart ground that is, totally parve, meat looking tofu material with, oh, what? Mommy's busy. Yeah, it's a headset. Okay, go talk to Tati. Mommy's giving a class. Sorry. So you can totally have that with cheese. You can have a hamburger made out of smart ground and a piece of cheese on it, and it's totally fine. It's not treif. You just don't want somebody looking at that and thinking, oh, that from person, that religious person is eating a cheeseburger, so it must be fine for me to do so. And the way to get around that is to leave the package out. To make sure that it's well known that this is not something, forbidden. So I hope, Laser Wolf, that answered your question. Maras ayin is a very, very tricky issue and a very, very tricky subject, and I highly recommend that you call your local Orthodox rabbi or whoever you're learning with and speak to them about the issue of Maras ayin. Okay, so we covered that. Sorry, I lost my spots. Okay. Okay, so it says in the Talmud, the sages say that when a person reaches heaven, one of the questions the person will be asked is, why did you not enjoy the pleasures of life that you had the opportunity to enjoy? And in fact, they say you will have to answer for every single piece of delicious food that you smelled or looked at and did not eat. So he's puts a little funny spin on it here, and he says, if you have the chance to taste a bit of coriander and don't, God will one day look at you and say, whom do you think I created that stuff for anyway? Myself? So the Jewish understanding of life is, while Coke really isn't it, there is far more to life than just physical pleasure. The endless array of physical pleasures are certainly created for us to enjoy. It seems that God didn't want to deny the Jewish people of anything that he created. So if Alaskan pollock, or, in my case, sea bass, can be made to taste like shrimp, then who knows? Tofu may be God's way of making sure we don't miss out on the taste of pork. So that is the explanation that he gives, and I think it's a very beautiful explanation. Okay, so we spoke about the perception part of eating kosher food in a non-kosher restaurant. Here's the technical aspect of it. Kosher food that's prepared in a non-kosher environment can bring up a lot of issues. So kosher packaged goods like cookies, snack foods, nuts, eating these foods directly from their original packaging, even in the middle of a non-kosher restaurant, avoids the problem of eating anything non-kosher. Even if such foods were served on a plate, as long as the plate is clean and only kosher foods are on the plate, one can eat the food. Okay, so if you're stuck in, again, this is harkening back to last week, if you're in a situation where you need to, be in a non-kosher restaurant, a social situation, you can absolutely eat prepackaged food, like, a package of Oreos, and keep it on the plate, and, it's totally fine. So, kosher food that's cooked together in the same oven as non-kosher food, and even kosher food cooked alone in an oven that has been used for non-kosher food, is rendered non-kosher through the cooking process. Heat is what treifs it up, so to speak. Peggy, shh, okay. It's not a guilt by association law, but rather it's about the kosher laws. And again, your local Orthodox rabbi, whoever you're studying with, can talk to you about heat and what it means to, make things non-kosher. So fresh uncut fruits do not present any problems. You can eat them at the farmer's market, at home, in a non-Jewish restaurant, in the airport, or anywhere. So if you're stuck in a situation again, like we spoke about last week, fruit is always a great option, and it's totally portable. And, again, I have to harken back to Avigdor Miller's little essay on apples, that it's portable, which is another one of the gifts that Hashem gave us with the apple. Okay, so I think that's all the questions that I want to cover from chapter 10 for this week. They sort of harken back to last week's discussion, and actually, honestly, answered a few questions here, which was great. I wanted to also tell you that in the center of the book, there's like a color inset with a bunch of recipes, and in this inset, he gives a whole bunch of kosher websites where you can either download recipes or order food. And it's just it's on page 142. It's a really great resource if you need to, utilize it. He does give the disclaimer that if you're shopping online, you need to be as careful shopping online as you are shopping at the grocery store. You have to make sure that there's a reliable, kosher supervision for every product that's not, that doesn't have a hechsher, and every packaged product has a hechsher. So the koshercook.com is on here, which we spoke about last week. Flyingpizzas.com, which I never heard of, which sounds amazing, where you can get pizza. Kosher.com. It has kosher desserts. The candy store online has candy from Baltimore. Really, really good stuff. So, having said that, I know it's kind of a short class, only 40 minutes long, but I wanted to go ahead and open up things for questions now, if you have any questions. Next week we'll move on to chapter 4, which is a little bit more of the spiritual side of things, a little bit about making brachas and so on and so forth. So read up on chapter 4 for next week, and in the meantime, I'll open it up for questions. Anybody that has. Okay, so Sharon says she'd be interested to understand some of the deeper meanings associated with kosher at some point. Sharon, you're in luck, because I don't know if you're talking about Kabbalah or if you're just talking about Torah stuff, but he covers this really, really deeply in the next chapter, in chapter 4, some of the deeper associations for kosher, sort of the mystical aspects of connecting with God through what we put into our bodies. So, okay, Judah's asking, do you have to cook your own food or what? Okay, Judah, so we spoke about this a couple of classes ago. I believe it was class 2 or 3, if you want to go back and watch it, but I will cover it again right here for you. Bishul Yisrael means food that is cooked by a Jew, okay? Now, the things that are covered under Bishul Yisrael, I'm going to actually quote from the book. Foods that can be eaten raw or normally wouldn't be served for an important occasion may be eaten in a cooked state regardless of who the chef was. So even if a non-Jew cooked it, for example, a potato chip, or, if you can eat it raw, like a piece of fruit, it does not need to be cooked by a Jew. Foods that cannot be eaten raw or that would be served at an important occasion must be cooked by a Jew. It is not required that the entire cooking process be carried out by a Jew. For example, the Jew could just light the fire, could just turn on the stove or the oven, and then that's considered Bishul Yisrael. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Bishul Akam refers to foods that are cooked by a non-Jew, and the only time it is referred to as Bishul Akam is when it's a non-kosher food. So again, something that can be eaten raw or something that would be served at an important occasion must be cooked by a Jew. And again, that could just mean turning on the fire. Okay, I hope that answered your question. Okay, DB says, I've heard you can double wrap food for non-kosher ovens. Is this true? There are certain circumstances in which you can double wrap food for non-kosher ovens. It's very, very complicated, and it's very delicate, and I hate to say this, but I'm going to pass the buck and say, please refer to your local Orthodox rabbi. Everybody's heard different things, and this is one of the issues in halakha where there is a machlokas. I simply tell people that I'm helping to learn about kosher, don't cook foods in a non-kosher oven. However it is done. For example, airline food, it's double wrapped. They put it in the non-kosher oven that they warm up everything else in to heat it up, and it's totally fine. It's totally kosher. You'll see the biggest rabbis in the world on planes to Israel eating the food on the airline. So it's totally fine, but it's only, I mean, again, it's a really sticky issue, and I just can't give you a straight up answer. You have to ask your local Rav or whoever you're studying with, because, your Rebbe, because every individual and every circumstance has its own halacha, okay? If you're eating one of the meals I spoke about last week, those amazing meals from Meal Mart, leave them in the box and they are totally able to be cooked in a conventional oven that isn't kosher. So that is one of the cases where I can say absolutely it's no problem. Every posuk in the world will tell you it's fine. But as for other individual circumstances, you need to speak to your individual rabbi. Okay? Anybody else have any other questions? I'm going to wait a little bit in case you guys have questions. Oh, and while I have you here, I wanted to tell you that I just recently found out that Food for Life brand, they make the Ezekiel 4-9 bread, sprouted grain bread. It's all pas Yisrael. All of their products are pas Yisrael except for the pitas. So you can enjoy those if you're keeping pas Yisrael at your leisure. And we really enjoy the brown rice English muffins. When toasted, they totally taste like a regular English muffin, same texture, same everything, which is really hard to find in a rice flour product, so we are thrilled. Food for Life, we love you. Okay. All right, any other questions for tonight? Okay, Laser Wolf asked, does all candy contain pig content? That's a very complicated question. I have heard of there being, unfortunately, animal blood put into a non-kosher chocolate, and there is a lot of candy that has gelatin in it, which almost always comes from non-kosher bones, which is a total no-no. So you really want to make sure that your candy has a hechsher, okay? So Nestle, most of their products have hechshers. Hershey's, most of their products have hechshers. Pashkez, which is a kosher brand of candy, all of their stuff has a very good hechsher. So you really need to look at the individual hechshers. And again, even though I said Nestle and Hershey's, not all their products are kosher. You need to look at each individual item. And my rule of thumb is always look before you cook. Or, in the case of candy, look before you eat. I always triple check my hechshers. You must do this because mistakes are easily made. It happened to me. I bought some crumpets actually at the store, and I thought for sure these are kosher, and I thought I saw a symbol, and I got home and I went to put them in the toaster, and they were totally not kosher. So I'm so glad I looked before I cooked. So look before you cook or look before you eat, especially in the case of candy, and I'll type in those brands. And again, not everything from them is kosher, so please look before you eat. Oh, Naomi from India is telling us that sugar is not kosher in India, which is a major bummer. We have kosher sugar and actually kosher for Passover Domino brand in the United States. As far as sugar, you may be able to find you may be able to have a heter for sugar. I would call your rabbi and ask him what they do for sugar. Your local rabbi. You said that the nearest Chabad is 500 miles away. It's possible you could have a heter for sugar because it's a single ingredient. The process is the problem. So I will give you my husband's email address. You can email him about it. And maybe he'll be able to So this is Rabbi Kolakowski's email address, and you can ask him. Yeah, so Naomi brought up a good point, is that in the process of processing sugar, that might render the sugar not kosher. So if you already know this, Naomi, I would just encourage you to use online. If you need us to ship you sugar, I'm happy to do it. I'll ship you a bunch of Domino's sugar. You just have to really be careful with, customs laws and all that sort of stuff. But if you want me to ship you anything, I'm happy to do it. And I'm happy to, even help you order it online if you need to. Okay. Let's see. I thought there was another question up here. Okay. So Shlomo Nahari says, how about Sephardim with their allowance of gelatin from non-kosher bones? How do they come to this reason for its allowance? I cannot speak for Sephardi authorities. I myself learned in an Ashkenazi environment, so I keep Ashkenazi minhagim. If you are Sephardi and you know this to be the custom in your community, I would really, really, really speak to someone that you respect about that, my baby's up. Someone that you respect and someone that you know will give you a straight up answer, a chacham, about that practice, because I have never heard that and it does not sound really kosher to me. But I'm not a posek, and I would really check with a Sephardi posek in your area about this. Okay? Anybody else have questions? Yeah, Shlomo Nahari. I've never. I have Sephardi. I have friends that are Sephardi. Hold on a second. Yitzchak? Joe? Can you get the baby? I know. Can you get her? Because, she's right here when I'm trying to give this class. Okay. So, Shlomo Nahari, if you heard that from a Sephardi rabbi, ask them who their source was, because I've never really heard of that. I mean, non-kosher gelatin is straight up not kosher. It's boiled bones of a pig, and that heat, it's just straight up treif. Sorry. So please ask those rabbis what their, who their posek is and where they derived that from, because I never heard that. Okay. Anybody else have questions? I'm going to give you a few more minutes to ask questions. Thank you, Yedidya, for that clarification about the non-kosher gelatin. Okay, so I am just giving another few more minutes before the 9 o'clock Noachide class. I think that my husband's going to give it because I think Reverend Grattan is unavailable. So please, please stay tuned for that, because it's going to give another couple of minutes for questions, and then I will let you go. Okay, one more minute for questions, and then I will turn you guys loose. No problem. Okay, everybody. Thank you, Total Rabah Laser, Total Rabah, everybody. I'm so grateful to you. So sorry, my baby is crying. Let me pick her up. Thank you so much for joining us in this class, and I hope that everybody got their questions answered. And if you didn't, please email me. I will put my email address into the box here. You can also... Sorry, my baby. That's my... That's my email address. You can also Facebook me. I don't always, I don't just friend everybody, so let me know that you're from the kosher class, and I will definitely, let you into my friends list, no problem. And if you have any questions, I'll... Sorry. Joe, can you help the baby? Sorry. So I hope you all have a great, happy, wonderful, and kosher week. Thanks, guys. Take care. I know. I let them know.